With us now in studio is the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Texas Republican Congressman Mike McCaul. Chairman McCaul, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks.
So the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, your colleague Congressman Mike Turner of Ohio, told me last week the U.S. is, quote, not pleased with Israel's attempts at reducing civilian casualties. He said they're trying, but it's not enough. Do you agree?
Well, you know, look, this hospital is a military base, essentially, the infrastructure. When I talked to the Minister
Military base for Hamas?
For Hamas. And they use, human shields, civilians and hostages. We talked to the Minister of Defense when I was in Israel. We said, look, you have to release this evidence of what they're doing, the tunnels, the hospital, to get this information out. I was really pleased that Kirby and the White House came out with the truth that this hospital is being used as a military base, in essence, and putting innocent civilians at risk and hostages. That's what they're doing. Now, the humanitarian pause, the Israelis support that. Netanyahu told us that. That's 4 hours every day to allow innocent civilians to take the road through the buffer zone they've created to southern Gaza, where the humanitarian efforts are taking place. Food, medicine, water coming through the Rafah gates from Egypt into southern Gaza. Is it perfect? No. But Hamas is putting their own people at risk here. And I just, when I met with the Prime Minister, he showed the Hamas videos of them invading Israel and barbarically killing, raping, decapitating, and burning. So let's not lose sight of who the victim really is.
So it's interesting. I'm wondering what you make of the fact that we hear criticism from the United Nations and from NGOs of the Israelis attacking Hamas in that hospital, for example. But I have yet to hear, and maybe I missed it, to be quite honest, but I have not heard, and again, this might be my fault, but I don't think I've heard the UN and some of these NGOs criticizing Hamas for having a command node underneath the hospital or for setting up bases and embedding within the population of Gaza. Did I miss it?
No, you're absolutely correct. I mean, they are a foreign terrorist organization designated as such by U.S. law. They oppress the Palestinians. And I think it's a very important point to make that when we're in Israel, they want to liberate the Palestinians from their oppressor. And there will not be peace in the Middle East until Hamas is eliminated as a governing body. Israel has no intention of occupying Gaza, by the way. They want to turn it over. They said the two things that can't govern would be Israel and Hamas. And the international community needs to come together. The Gulf states, Jordan, Egypt, all need to come together as part of this solution. And the reason why Hamas invaded in the first place, in my judgment, is a 50-year anniversary of Yom Kippur, but also, the fact, that the Saudis were working out this normalization agreement with Israel. That terrified Iran, and Iran lit up their proxies.
Yeah. You said something just a second ago about Israelis being the victim, and I want to play part of something you said after you watched the footage that you just referred to of the Hamas attack on October 7th.
They wanted members to see this, to never forget, to remember what happened on October 7th, as we see the narrative shifting that somehow the Palestinians are the victims. Well, I can assure you, everybody who saw that video today knows who the real victims are. The victims were the Jewish people.
I just wonder, though, I mean, it's not really an either or. I mean, there are victims in Gaza, too, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
And the Palestinians are victims of Hamas, just as the Jewish people are victims of Hamas. This is the largest killing of Jewish people since my father's war, World War II, in the Holocaust. And that, is hugely important. Our gripe is not with the Palestinian people. We want to liberate them from their oppressor. And so for the protesters, I'm not sure, first of all, it'd be great if they could see this video. But secondly, what I'm seeing on social media is a disinformation campaign run by Iran, Russia, and China, because remember, TikTok is running a lot of this stuff. They control the algorithms that if you type in Israel and Palestinian, it's gonna feed you information that's pro-Hamas.
Mm-hmm. Today, there was another instance where a U.S. warship shot down a drone they think originated from Yemen. This comes after a string of attacks by Iran-backed proxies on U.S. forces in the Middle East. What's your message to Americans who fear that all of this could quickly evolve, or devolve rather, into a wider war, whether it's the U.S. fighting Hezbollah or the Houthi rebels or more? And people are genuinely afraid. I mean, the U.S. has been attacked in Syria and Iraq, and people are afraid that this is going to end up with U.S. boots on the ground.
Yeah, and this is a nightmare scenario. My committee will produce the authorization of use of military force. We're not authorized to hit Hezbollah, Hamas, or Iran for that matter. We don't want to see that happen. So deterrence is really key here, right? So you have the carrier strike force in the Mediterranean, the carrier strike force that's going into the Persian Gulf, and a nuclear submarine, all providing that deterrence. Now, we've been hit 55 times in Iraq and Syria with only
what kind of deterrence?
With only 3 responses. I brought this up at the classified briefing that I monitored the other day. You know, that's not deterrence.
Right.
But I do give the administration credit for this. The president's been very strong on Israel, and they have put force protection in the region to make sure that this doesn't lead to Hezbollah firing their 100,000 rockets, which would overload the Iron Dome.
But if all that presence in the Mediterranean isn't providing the deterrence to dissuade the Houthi rebels or Hezbollah from attacking U.S. forces, then what will?
I think they need to respond stronger to these attacks. They're very worried about firing rockets into Yemen. Again, an authorization of use of military force situation. That's defense of Israel, not our troops. So our troops in Iraq and Syria, that's Article 2 self-defense. But they don't have authorization to hit Yemen or Hezbollah in Lebanon or Hamas, for that matter, in Gaza. And I think we don't want this to escalate.
Right.
And I think the deterrence is the best way to ensure that does not happen. And I think Congress should be talking about this a lot, that we are prepared to do an authorization if that will deter an escalation.
You guys should be talking about it instead of shooting elbows to each other's kidneys in the halls, right?